Okay, so let's get right into it. Today, we're really putting Hollywood under the microscope. We're going to look way past the shiny red carpets and all those perfectly curated Instagram feeds, and we're going to dig into three huge, very public stories that, honestly, reveal some intense private pressures that some of the world's biggest stars are facing. We're talking everything from relationship drama that's just exploding in the headlines to these high-stakes legal fights and even deeply personal health scares. We're going to unpack what really happens when a celebrity's life stops being their own and becomes, well, everybody's business.
And really, all of this leads us to the one central question for today. What is the true price of fame? I mean, is it just about losing your privacy, the constant criticism of every single little choice you make? Or is it something way deeper, a kind of weight that just magnifies every personal struggle you have and turns it into this massive public spectacle? We're going to explore this through three very different but very real examples that have been playing out right in front of us.
So here's the game plan. First up, we're going to try and untangle the super complicated and often totally contradictory headlines swirling around Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck. Then, we'll switch gears and clear up the strategy behind a really confusing legal battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. And finally, we'll wrap up with a moment of just raw honesty from Drew Barrymore, one that connects a recent health scare all the way back to her incredibly traumatic past.
Let's kick things off with our first story, the saga of Bennifer, that honestly never seems to end. I mean, their reunion was this massive cultural moment, right? It was like this fairy tale comeback story that the whole world was cheering for. But now, the reported separation has been just as public, and it's created this tangled web of conflicting reports and whispers from, anonymous sources about what is really going on behind the scenes.
Okay, so what's so fascinating here is the wildly different stories that sources close to each of them are telling. On one side, you have reports claiming Jennifer Lopez is doing everything she can to stay connected, that she's clinging to this hope of getting back together. She's reportedly sending him social media posts, fan comments, things about how in love they still look. But then on the other side, friends of Ben Affleck are painting this picture of a guy who's just trying to run for the hills, who feels horrified by all this and feels like he's being dragged back into a cycle he is desperate to get away from.
And this quote, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? This, supposedly coming from Affleck's friends, is so telling. To describe their entire, huge two-part relationship as just a blip, that suggests a massive, massive difference in how each of them reportedly sees it. I mean, blip is such a dismissive word, and it really pours fuel on the fire that for him, at least according to these sources, a Bennifer 3.0 is absolutely not happening.
So you might be asking, if they're trying to split up, why are we still seeing them together? Well, like so many things in Hollywood, it comes down to business. Affleck's own production company actually funded J.Lo's new movie, Kiss of the Spider-Woman. She's called it her dream project. And here's the real irony, an escape from how hard their divorce has been. But because his company's name is on it, he's professionally tied to it. Sources say he went to the premiere totally against his better judgment and now regrets it, because it was right after that appearance that the constant text and calls allegedly ramped up again, just blurring those lines between professional duty and personal space.
But wait, the story gets even more complicated. Just as the door seems to be closing on J.Lo, another one might be creaking open to his past. Reports are now claiming that Ben Affleck might still have a thing for his ex, Ana de Armas. Friends are alleging that he feels they have unfinished business, and that even when he was back with J.Lo, he would sometimes mention how great Anna was. So now that he's single again, he reportedly wants to reach out and, test the waters. So what this really shows us is that this isn't just about one relationship ending. It's about the shadows of past relationships making the present and the future way, way more complicated.
All right, let's switch gears. We're moving from a messy romantic entanglement to a messy legal one. The lawsuit between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has been filled with so many confusing headlines and a ton of misinformation. So our goal here is to just cut through all that noise and explain the actual legal strategy that's going on, because it is way more complex than the headlines want you to believe.
So if you've been following this at all, you've probably seen the headlines, right? The ones that make it sound like Justin Baldoni has already lost his case, that he missed some critical deadline, and it's pretty much game over for him. But is that what actually happened? Well, the short answer is no. The reality is much more about smart legal moves than some kind of knockout punch. And it's a perfect example of how courtroom strategy gets totally misunderstood by the public.
Let's just walk through the timeline to see what's really happening. Okay. Back in January, Baldoni files a countersuit against Lively for defamation. Then, in June, a judge dismisses that specific countersuit. Now, here's the part that got twisted. Headlines started yelling that he missed a deadline to appeal, but in reality, his team made a conscious choice not to. And why would they do that? Because the main event, Blake Lively's original lawsuit against him, is still very much alive and kicking, with a trial date set for March 2026.
And this right here is the real story. Deciding not to appeal wasn't him admitting he was wrong, and it wasn't a mistake. It was a strategic pivot. Think of it like a game of chess. Instead of wasting time, money, and energy trying to revive their countersuit, which was a piece they were willing to sacrifice, Baldoni's legal team is now pouring all of their resources into defending against Lively's original claims in that big trial. They've decided to focus on winning the war, not a preliminary battle.
So you might be wondering, okay, but why was his countersuit dismissed in the first place? Well, it all comes down to a really important legal idea called litigation privilege. Basically, in California law, it means you're protected from being sued for defamation for things you say inside an official court filing. Since all of Blake Lively's accusations were made in her official complaint, not in interviews or on Twitter, they were protected. So the judge dismissed the countersuit because of that rule, not because her claims were proven true or his were proven false. The actual truth of all this still hasn't even been argued in court yet.
For our final story, we're going to turn to Drew Barrymore, and this one isn't about public fights or lawsuits. It's about a very private struggle that she just recently decided to share. It's a story that connects directly to a lifetime of her overcoming trauma, and it's a powerful reminder of the incredibly resilient human being behind the celebrity we all know and love. We're really shifting from those external battlegrounds to a deeply internal one.
So she recently opened up on her show about this just absolutely terrifying experience. Getting that call, being taken into that room, the room everyone dreads, and then having to wait 5 agonizing days for the biopsy results. It's just a moment of profound vulnerability that honestly, anyone who's ever faced a health scare can immediately understand. And for someone who has lived her entire life in the public eye, sharing that kind of raw fear is an incredibly powerful, humanizing thing to do.
To really get a sense of Drew's resilience today, you have to understand her past, which is almost hard to believe happened to a child. By the time she was 13, an age when most of us are worried about homework or crushes, she was already battling serious addictions to drugs and alcohol. She was put at rehab and then spent a year and a half locked in a psychiatric facility. And this was not some cushy celebrity retreat. She's described how patients who acted out could literally be put in stretcher restraints and tied up. Just a horrifying experience for anyone, let alone a young teenager.
And what's really interesting about this quote is how she directly pushes back against this modern idea of celebrity wellness. She kind of scoffs at what she calls Malibu 30-day places, describing some of them as being more like a spa vacation. Her experience at Van Nuys Psychiatric was the complete opposite. It was a lockdown facility with very serious consequences, a really harsh reality for a 13-year-old girl who said she felt completely and utterly alone in the world. So here's the main takeaway. When you look at all 3 of these stories together, a romance that's collapsing under the weight of public pressure, a career-defining legal fight being spun by confusing headlines, and a deeply personal health scare being shared with the world, you start to see this really clear unifying theme. Fame doesn't protect you from life's struggles. It acts like a giant magnifying glass, amplifying every single problem and playing it out on a global stage for everyone to watch, to judge, and to consume. And that really just leaves us with this final thought to chew on. When we consume these stories, when we click on the headlines and we dissect all the little details, are we just watching public entertainment, like a modern-day soap opera? Or are we actually just spectators to someone's private and often deeply painful reality? It's something worth thinking about the next time a big celebrity story catches your eye.